Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. This is Love Creole, otherwise known as John Counsel. Love Creole is my YouTube handle. Some of you may have seen my comments on some of these boards, particularly boards of a political nature dealing with the crisis of America and how we got into this situation to begin with. But I just got finished watching a very, shall I say, lively video from obviously a fellow sympathizer and compatriot out there about the Federal Reserve. And if you're watching this, more than likely that's how you got to this page, as I am giving a video response instead of the usual 300-word max written or typed response. What the gentleman you just heard talking about the Federal Reserve said is absolutely true. And the parts that I didn't know, I wouldn't deny. I wouldn't deny it at all, because it all fits the established pattern. My reason for responding to the video is simply this, and this is also for the gentleman in question too, to throw a few extra things out there for consideration, because if there's one thing that I have noticed about all of this, and some of the people on the boards who responded to your video mentioned this, and that is ignorance seems to be the prevailing problem today, and apathy. People are ignorant to the facts of how this system is actually run. They are ignorant to the facts of historically what people have tried to do to stop this insidious system of the Federal Reserve. And they are equally apathetic about trying to find a way to change the system. It's almost as if they've given it over to, this is just the way things have always been, this is the way they're always going to be, and so I'll just stick with what I know, even though it doesn't work. Whether you go Democrat, Republican, it doesn't matter. Either way, it's all just, like Ross Perot called it, gorilla dust. It's going nowhere, and it's designed to go nowhere. But the things that I want to add to this discussion is certain things that even those who are passionately trying to change the system and enlighten people, they may not be aware of. That the situation with the Federal Reserve is not a unique one. It is only a continuation of what this nation has had in various forms throughout its history. It's just a more blatant, in-your-face example of what this nation has had throughout its history. One thing I have found that people are very ignorant of, especially when they bring up the Founding Fathers, is the fact that our founders warned against this, particularly Thomas Jefferson. And you're right, Thomas Jefferson did warn about the power of banks. He did say that quote, and a lot of people are blown away when I show them that quote, by the way. But what they don't realize is, like with other issues of the Founding Fathers, they were very contradictory in the way they behaved, and our history shows that they were. One example is obviously the issue of slavery. Now I know people get tired of hearing that. It's like, well, yeah, they preach freedom and democracy, but then they keep the slaves out of it, even putting it in the Constitution by making them 2/3 of a man. So therefore, since they're 2/3 of a man, they're not human, so therefore God's requirement that every man be free to do as he wished, to pursue happiness, which life, liberty, and pursuit of happiness is about, doesn't apply to people who are not human. Now, we all know that's BS, okay? Everybody's a human being. We may look different from each other, but we're all human beings. So, the point is this. Why did they do it? It's not good enough to just sit there and keep citing it over and over again ad nauseum that they didn't make the Constitution universal. Well, I'd like to float for you the idea, after studying that period in greater detail, that it was by design that it was done the way it was, and the root reason is a lot closer to our current day situation than people realize. Let me give you an example from someone who tried to warn Americans even before Woodrow Wilson and the Federal Reserve even showed up, of just what kind of dangerous elements were hidden inside America's democratic system. And I got all sorts of people, well after the founders, even during the founders period, people who saw the problem way back then. And I'm not talking about with England, okay? England is out of the picture. We're talking about right here in the United States. The threat is under your nose. And that was actually a greater threat than what you had in England. But the point was through political manipulation and through hiding various facts, and of course the gap in education between the average American and those of the government founder business class, finance class, to, you know, the financial institutions. You never would have seen it coming unless you knew about these people and you thought for a second, wait a minute, what if they're right? Same thing we got today. People screaming at the top of their lungs. Average person on the street doesn't know, but even when you do tell them, it's like, this dissertation comes from Queen Lulukalani, the last reigning sovereign over the Kingdom of Hawaii. Yes, Hawaii was its own independent nation at one time. And yes, they, in the interests of friendship and everything, allowed missionaries, I'm sad to say as a Christian it would have to be missionaries, but it is what it is, to come in and befriend them and bring them the gospel. But not only that, they sought to Americanize them, to culturalize them, to get them to see that there are better ways of running their island governmentally wise, you know, called democracy. In this case, it was a constitutional monarchy to start it off with, and that they felt that this would be better for them, and the Hawaiians believed them. So, sorry guys, I'm running out of time here. Anyway, well, 75 years passed, and this joint American-Hawaiian government with kings and queens and everything seemed to do the island well. Businesses prospered, particularly sugar plantations. People were imported in, particularly Japanese, to work the fields and everything. But after 75 years, a queen rose, who all of a sudden became a threat to these sugar plantations. And these sugar plantations felt that it would be necessary to end this current oppressive government and to seek a U.S. governorship over the island, with them in charge, by the way. Oh, and let me mention, at the time that they decided to do this, there was a 30% tariff on sugar imports. Now you put two and two together. I'll read from this one book, this one page, what Queen Lulukalani had to say as a warning when she was fighting to save her island from being handed over to a foreign power by these business interests. It is in the 6th article that the missionary parties show their determination to keep the same position under the flag of the United States that they have held at the islands ever since the Revolution of 1887. By this which is made part of the treaty, and so, if it should be ratified as it stands, it can never be changed, not even by act of Congress. The President is to appoint 5 commissioners, 2 of whom shall be residents of the Hawaiian Islands. By these, all legislation in regard to that territory is to be recommended to Congress, which means that the missionary party shall continue to control all measures enacted in regard to Hawaii and the Hawaiians, that there shall be no essential change in their greedy and deceitful policies, that they shall still coin money through the manipulation of the sugar interests and the management of the plantations and the labor question. Did you get that? Coining money, management of the plantations, and labor issues. I will save my conclusion for the second video that I will post to continue this response because I'm running out of time. You can think about that in the meantime.